You are taught in school that the American presidency is a story of grand speeches, historic legislation, and unshakable leadership. But the truth is, the Oval Office is fundamentally a psychological cage. It is the loneliest room in the world, requiring a single person to hold the crushing weight of millions of lives. The men who lived inside it rarely survived the pressure through brilliant policy. They survived through deeply private, often bizarre coping mechanisms. We can map this survival across 3 escalating tiers of coping: physical shock, environmental solitude, and finally, total displacement. The marble monuments we see today are simply the public residue left by men who spent their nights desperately trying to keep their minds intact. The base tier of this architecture relies on the body. When the mind begins to spiral, physical control becomes a tether. John Quincy Adams suffered from severe clinical depression. In the 1820s, there were no frameworks for mental health, no therapists, and no medication to help him navigate his despair. Instead, Adams woke before dawn, walked down to the Potomac River, stripped completely naked, and swam in the freezing water for an hour. He used the intense physical shock of the cold to force his nervous system to function. A century later, Franklin Delano Roosevelt needed a very different kind of physical discipline. He lacked the ability to shock his system. He needed total aesthetic control. Paralyzed from the waist down by polio in 1921, Roosevelt knew he could not control his legs, so he obsessively controlled his face. He spent hours entirely alone in front of mirrors, painstakingly choreographing his head tilts and his trademark smile. Both men relied on exhausting, calculated physical routines to mask their immense internal vulnerability, projecting a highly constructed image of command. When controlling the body fails, leaders move to the second tier, environmental solitude. This is the search for literal quiet, far from the demands of other people. Abraham Lincoln lived with a profound melancholy, a depression so severe his friends once removed sharp objects from his room. During the Civil War, the White House was swarming with favor seekers, making his own home suffocating. Unable to sleep, Lincoln would walk across the dark grounds to the War Department's telegraph office and simply sit in the quiet room for hours. In the dim lamplight, there were no politicians demanding his attention. There was only the steady, mechanical clicking of the machines, giving him a rhythm to process his thoughts without interruption. This physical shift was essential. It provided a temporary sanctuary from the overwhelming social noise, allowing him to sit with the news of boys dying in fields he would never see. If the environment cannot offer peace, the mind fractures further into the final tier, complete psychological displacement. Here, a leader detaches from the living entirely. Calvin Coolidge was famously quiet in public, but after his 16-year-old son died from an infected blister in 1924, Coolidge shattered internally. He began sleeping up to 14 hours a day, using unconsciousness as an escape. Awake at his desk, he held detailed, one-sided conversations with toy figurines and rubber animals, addressing them as if they had just asked him a question. The ultimate endpoint of this isolation belongs to Richard Nixon. As the Watergate scandal slowly destroyed his administration, Nixon became completely walled off. Late at night, heavily isolated, Nixon would wander the empty corridors of the White House. He stopped talking to his advisors and began talking out loud to the portraits of dead presidents. Henry Kissinger once found him kneeling on the floor in front of Abraham Lincoln. He would stand before Woodrow Wilson, asking the canvas directly how he handled the intense pressure when everyone wanted him to fail. When he wasn't speaking to the dead, Nixon retreated to the White House basement at 2 a.m. to bowl. He practiced completely alone in the darkness, playing a game nobody else was playing. At the absolute height of their power, these men sought companionship from rubber toys and oil paintings. The burden of answering to the living had simply become too heavy to bear. We look at the highest office in the land and see a monolith. We forget that inside it were vulnerable people, sitting in the dark, trying to figure out how to survive the night. So, as your own thoughts slow down, be grateful that your worst coping habits probably just involve scrolling on your phone and not having desperate late-night heart-to-hearts with a painting. You do not have to carry the weight of a nation. Let the strange, quiet rituals of the past settle. And remember, the true cost of power is paying the toll of isolation.